Okay, so this project will work with our simple version of the Canada Games, right? So I'm going to come up here, I don't know, I could type UWP. By the way, just a note, if you've, on your own version of Visual Studio, if you've been letting all the latest updates get installed, you'll find that there are two different versions of Blank App Universals. There's one that actually now just mentions .NET native, and one that actually mentions that one of the newer technologies is out as well. To be consistent with this installation of Visual Studio, just use the one that says .NET native, okay, to be exactly the same. All right, so Blank App Universal Windows, but I don't want the app yet. I'm going to start with the class library, okay? Same thing you'll find with the class library. So I'll just select that, I'll click Next, and I'm going to call it Canada Games Library. Will be the name of the project. Now I could change the name of the solution, but because these are going to be totally separate projects anyway, I'm not going to bother. Now for the location, as you know, I don't like to work anything that gets synchronized, so I'm going to come down here to the C drive, and earlier on I made this folder. It's empty right now, my work, right? So I'm going to select that folder to put my work in as I'm working it, right? Any questions there? Okay, I'll take these defaults based on the SDKs I have installed. All right, so here we are with our class library. Now, you know, I could just delete this class and start from scratch, but maybe I'll show you how you can work with it. One of the first things I want to do, though, is install Dapper, right? Now, I could do that in two different ways, and we're going to demonstrate both today. For this one, I'll just go to the Package Manager console, as we did in our other demo last week, and I'll just do my install package. Hit tab. Oh, come on. Why am I not? Okay. Oh, I guess I have to spell it right for IntelliSense to help me out. I still have to spell it right. Install package. There we go. Dapper. Ah. Okay, so I have Dapper in place. I also want to keep my code organized, so I'm going to add a couple folders. I'll add one for models. And I'll add a folder called data. So in the models folder, I'll add the two classes to correspond to the work I want to do, right? One, I'm going to simply call lookup. This is what I typically do, even though in many apps you might actually have 2, 3, 4 or more different lookup values. If there's lots of foreign keys in an entity, you can reuse the same class, because really you're just using the same approach, right? You're going to have a value for each option in your drop-down list or combo box, whatever UI you're using, right? And then something that is displayed in that drop-down list, right? So my lookup class is designed to work with that, and I can use it for any kind of lookup, whether it's regions in the country or ratings for a movie, you know, PG versus PG-13, it doesn't matter, right? If it goes in a combo box or drop-down list or select element, then I can use the same basic structure here, right? Okay, I have my value, my ID, and then my display text. By the way, that term is a holdover to an earlier tool we don't use anymore. That's what they called it in the actual drop-down list, right? So I've just stuck with that. It does the point. Okay, I'll add the other one here. Now this is the more important one, obviously. This is my athlete. And my athlete class, we're going to come back talk more about these summary properties in a couple minutes, but I'll just get the class in here for now. Now the data types, of course, are C# data types to correspond to data coming from the view that we're working with inside SQL Server, right? You notice I've got some summary properties here. I'm calculating the age, right? It has a getter but no setter. Same with our full name here, right? I have basically this is a way of another alternate way of writing this property, so that's why I wanted to include this. And then this one, this summary property, okay, this is the one that I could not get from the database view even if I wanted to, because notice we're checking here, we have some logic that we're checking if the ID is greater than 0, then I'm going to report the full name as part of the summary, plus concatenating on the contingent at the end, right? But if I don't have an ID greater than 0, it's just going to say new athlete, right? This is a good kind of a summary property to use in the user interface, because if I'm in that details page creating a new athlete, I can just always have the summary property showing at the top of the page, and it'll just say new athlete, right? If I'm making a new one. Well, I can't do that. I'll never get a 0 coming from the database for the ID. So it is useful, but useful only on the client side, right? This couldn't come from the database, because in the database there's always going to be a valid ID value. Anyway, we'll talk more about why I might or might not have these summary properties in here. I have this bonus one I added showing the age plus the gender, right? Anyway, everything else is pretty straightforward. Oh, byte array, we talked about that before. That's the C# best way to store that timestamp or row version inside of SQL Server. We store it as an array of byte characters, basically. Take time for date of birth, and everything else is what we would expect. Integers, doubles, and strings where we need them, right? Okay. All right, so there's our two classes inside of our models folder. Now in terms of data, I'm going to add classes here. Now the first thing, we're going to be consistent in always defining an interface first. Very good approach for many situations. In fact, most situations, we're going to start off with an interface. So my one for the lookup value here in this case, the gender, is very straightforward. I'm just going to go and get my collection, my IEnumerable collection of lookup values when I call get genders, right? So inside the database, there's really just two genders, male and female, or man, woman, whatever they're called, I can't remember in the data, right? So they'll just be stored inside this particular collection, but I have to implement that. So it's a good idea to define the interface first, so that when we go to implement it, in the end we might actually implement it multiple ways, so we can even switch live between one database system and another possibly, or certainly at design time so we can do so, right? Okay, so the gender repository, I'll do that next. And this is the one that will implement, okay? We've gone through this kind of code before, so I'm trying to keep the pace up a little bit here. So I'll just copy and paste it in. But again, I'll emphasize we're implementing the gender repository interface, right? In our constructor for the repository, we'll get our connection string. That's the same approach we used last week as well. So it'll be up to actually the UI to have the connection string and pass it here into this class library when required. Okay. Now, the one method here that's required, our getGenders, returns a IEnumerable of lookup class objects, right? We'll open our connection and we'll try, okay, to open the connection and then do this. Now, there's a problem. It says, hey, I don't understand query async. Is it going to offer to help me out here? Yeah. I'm missing my using. I installed it, but it's missing the using. So I'll just select this and then double check, yeah, sure enough, it added using. So I knew what the problem was. I could have just gone up to the top and typed it, but just wanted to point out that Visual Studio can be helpful in ways like that as well. So query async, now notice we actually specify the class of objects. So as an object relational mapping system, Dapper will take the data coming from what? Coming from this stored procedure. Notice we specify the command type is stored procedure, and it will automatically map, okay, the data being returned into the properties of my lookup, right? And recall our stored procedure was set up to use those same names, ID and display text, for the data values it returns. Okay, and that will get my genders. I just return it. Now you might wonder, scratch your head at this. Why did Dave emphasize so much that we always want to wrap any operation with the database in something like a try-catch? But yet in my catch, I'm not really handling it. I'm just throwing the exception back. Well, there's a good reason for that, right? It's going to be the job of the front end. The UI layer will actually handle the exception. So the repository, it just says, uh-oh, here you go, it's your job, you deal with it, right? So we just throw the exception up a level, you might say, to the actual UI itself. All right? By the way, I really encourage the use of these summary comments. All you do is you go 3 slashes and it creates this whole template for the comment. The advantage is, among other things, when you go in code to instantiate an object like this, IntelliSense will actually come up and show whatever you've written in your summary comments to give an explanation of how to use the actual class and its methods and so on and so forth. So really good thing to get in the habit of doing is adding those as well. Any questions about the simple one here? Okay, let's go on and do the much more interesting one, and that will be our athlete. Okay, so I'll start off once more with the repository. I can select interface, but it makes no real difference because I'll define it as an interface in code, right? So this one, it's going to be a read only, this implementation, so I just have my 3 gets, right? I'm going to get all athletes, okay, returning that collection of athlete objects, get one athlete by ID, and then my get by X, right? I have that stored procedure in the database. We looked at it before. Okay, I passed the contingent ID, the gender ID, characters I'm going to search in the name, so I just called it name filter, and then a minimum and maximum dates, right, for that range. Okay, maybe I should just remind us, did I close? Oh, I still have it open. Should just remind us what the database looks like here. So if I come into Canada Summer Games, down to programmability, stored procedures, okay, I've really just referenced mainly, look at, here's our gender list one. Let me just script that out. Right? The only thing to notice here is that we're returning ID and name as display text, so that makes it easy for Dapper to match, okay, the data to my class. And we've also done the order by right here in the stored procedure as well, so it should be ordered in the drop-down list properly for us, right? The other one to look at quickly, my select by X. It's set up, notice everything is in varchars, all the parameters, right? However, when we call it, we're going to pass the actual proper integers, strings, okay, and so on, right? That's not a problem. SQL Server will take that information that we're passing it, even though it says I'm looking for strings only, it will just do any conversions required. So we don't have to worry about that, the fact that the stored procedure looks for an in varchar or anything else, and I'm sending an actual date time, right? It will work out just fine. Okay. All right. So I have the interface defined. To implement it, using Dapper, of course, will be our athlete repository. I'm just going to grab the code and we'll walk through it. Now once more, okay, it's saying, hey, wait a second, we need Dapper. So I'll add the using for Dapper. Okay. Same thing, we pass in the connection string as we construct the repository object. This is exactly the same. We're just getting all athletes, so we call the athlete select all procedure, right? The next one, we're getting one athlete at a time, right? Get athlete. Notice we don't return a collection, we return a single athlete object, okay? So here, the difference. Query first or default async, right? That's built into Dapper, and basically first or default is what we would normally go to. By the way, there's a variation on that singular default, right? You could use either one, they would both work. The difference is between the two, singular default will work better if there's a chance of returning multiple ones, right? First or default is more certain that we're going to just get one. Anyway, it doesn't make a huge difference. We have an athlete object, our stored procedure is there, and then, okay, we pass a parameter. So if I hover over query first or default, notice it says there in the IntelliSense, first thing we pass is the string, the SQL, Then there's a nullable object parameter. Okay, so this is an anonymous type. You've done work with anonymous types before, I know, right? It's just a C# class we're defining on the fly. It doesn't even get a name, right? It's just an anonymous type, and we can use it to pass in order, if there was more than one, okay, the actual values then to correspond to the parameters of the stored procedure. So that's one way to pass, okay, parameters to a stored procedure. And we're going to do basically the same kind of thing down here with our get by X, right? Our filter one, okay? We actually have all the parameters passed in here with the proper C# data types, but down here my anonymous type has multiple parameters in it, right? But it's the same concept. We'll just use an anonymous type to give all the parameters. They have to be in the right order to match the order that's expected, okay, using this approach. Now in our next demo, I'll show you another way to pass parameters. That is where we actually create a collection of what are called dynamic parameters. It gives us the chance to specify data types much more clearly, plus we can have output parameters specified by using dynamic parameters, right? So sometimes this is the short and easy way, and why not use it if it does the job? But quite often it's more clear if you use dynamic parameters, even if they aren't technically speaking always required. It's not right or wrong as far as that's concerned. But I just want to introduce these different approaches kind of one at a time to give you different examples. So that's basically it. That's all we need in this repository because we aren't worried about insert, update, or delete just yet. Any questions about that so far? All right, I'm going to clean up the screen and close all these tabs. Okay. Do we need to do anything else in the UI? No. So I'll just do a build. Now notice I'm in debug. I'm not in release yet. Oh, I had an extra curly brace in there somehow when I did my copy paste. Okay, fix that build error. We'll build again. There we go. Build succeeded, right? Now I could switch to release if I wanted to, but I'm just going to leave it in the debug, and that's fine. Do I even need this project open anymore? No. I can just close it. I'm done with it. I've made the middle layer, right? So I will start a new instance of Visual Studio now. Maybe I'll start and stop the recording just to break it up a little bit so you can find your way through it a bit more. Control Shift F12.